Roman art is a very broad topic spanning almost 1,000 years on three continents, from Europe into Africa and Asia. The first Roman art can be dated back to 509 BCE with the legendary founding of the Roman Republic and lasted until 330 CE or much longer if you include Byzantine art. Roman art also encompasses a broad spectrum of media including marble, painting, mosaic, gems, silver and bronze work, just to name a few. The city of Rome was a melting pot, and the Romans had no qualms about adopting artistic influences from other Mediterranean cultures that surrounded and preceded them. For this reason, it is common to see Greek, Etruscan, and Egyptian influences throughout Roman art. This is not to say that all of Roman art is derivative, though, and one of the challenges for specialists is to define what is Roman about Roman art. For several centuries, ancient Rome was the most powerful nation on earth, excelling all others at military organization and warfare, engineering and architecture. Its unique cultural achievements include the invention of the dome and the groin vault, the development of the concrete and a European-wide network of roads and bridges. Despite these, Roman sculptors and painters produced only a limited amount of outstanding original fine art, preferring instead to recycle designs from Greek art, which they revered as far superior to their own. Indeed, many types of art practiced by the Romans including sculpture, fine art painting, and decorative art had already been fully mastered by the ancient Greek artists. Not surprisingly, therefore, while numerous Greek were acquired great respect throughout the Hellenistic world, most Roman artists were regarded as no more than skilled tradesmen and have remained anonymous. Of course, it is wrong to say that Roman art was devoid of innovation. Its urban architecture was groundbreaking, as was its landscape painting and portrait busts. Nor it is true that Roman artists produced no great masterpieces. Witness the extraordinary relief sculpture on monuments like Ara Pacis Augustae and Trajan's Column. But on the whole, we can say that Roman art was predominantly derivative and, above all, utilitarian. It served a purpose, a higher good, the dissemination of Roman values along with a respect for Roman power. As it transpired, classical Roman art has been immensely influential on many subsequent cultures. Through revivalist movements like neoclassical architecture, which have shaped much European and American architecture as exemplified by the US Capitol building. Although Rome was founded as far back as 750 BCE, it led a precarious existence for several centuries. Initially, it was ruled by Etruscan kings who commissioned a variety of Etruscan arts, which is murals, sculptures, and metalworks, for their tombs as well as their palaces, and to celebrate their military victories. After the founding of the Roman Republic in 500 BCE, Etruscan influence waned, and from 300 BCE, as the Romans started coming into contact with the flourishing Greek cities of southern Italy and the eastern Mediterranean, they fell under the influence of Greek art, which is a process known as Hellenization. Soon many Greek works of art were being taken to Rome as booty, and many Greek artists followed to pursue their careers under Roman patronage. However, the arts were still not a priority for Roman leaders who were more concerned about the survival and military affairs. It wasn't until about 200 BC, after it won the First Punic War against Hannibal and the Carthaginians, the Rome felt secure enough to develop its culture. Even then, the absence of an independent cultural tradition of its own meant that most ancient art of Rome imitated Greek works. Rome was unique among the powers of the ancient world in developing only a limited artistic language of its own. When we think of Rome, we think of the Colosseum, grand architectural establishments, marble sculpture, including famous ancient Rome poets like Virgil or Ovid. Most Roman artwork is derived from the preceding Greek and Etruscan civilization. It is well known that ancient Rome was one of the biggest empires in human history. For this reason, the topic of ancient Rome art is broad, since it includes traditional art practiced for over 1,000 years across the vast regions of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The earliest recognizable pieces of the ancient Roman art date back to before 500 BC. Roman art was clearly influenced by the artistic practice popular during the classical Greek era. The Roman art took whatever they could learn from the existing practices and then built upon them to develop their own artistic style. Here is the list of the top 10 pieces of ancient Roman art and sculpture that have been recognized throughout the history. First is the fresco wall from the House of Livia. Second is the column of Trajan. The third is the altar of the Augustan Peace. The fourth is the Dionysus frieze Villa of Mysteries. Fifth is the Ark of Constantine. Sixth is the column of Marcus Aurelius. The seventh is the Ark of Septimius Severus. Eighth is the Axian Room House of the Viti. Ninth is the Spear Bearer. Tenth is the Roman mosaics.
The characteristics of Roman art. The Romans perfected the art of mosaic and mural painting, emphasizing natural themes such as landscapes and literary and mythological themes. Roman art used deep red, yellow, green, violet, and black. The Roman Empire's duration and size had a tremendous impact on Western culture. The Greek influence on Roman art is often criticized. While this is somewhat true, Roman art and artists advanced in many aspects of art and architecture. The elements of Greek sculpture are realism, idealism, and the harmony of form, which held great appeal to the Romans. Most historians consider Roman art as a mediocre replica of Greek art at best. The Greeks almost religiously expressed themselves through art, but the Romans seem to have considered it more like a commodity. The Etruscans, Rome's ancestors on the Italian mainland, and Greek influences shaped Roman art. The Romans not only copied Greek artistic ideas but also recruited Greek painters to Rome to design and renovate massive structures. The Greek influence was strong in Roman painting and sculpture. Its Greek ancestors' art was much more spectacular. Despite these flaws, the huge demand of art for Rome, especially among the Roman elites, means that Roman art outnumbers all other cultures. So many magnificent Greek sculptures are only Roman copies. Greek sculpture sometimes incorporated mythology and athletics. Their statues idealize their subjects, making them attractively unrealistic. While the Romans carved historical events and real people, and their sculpture are stunning. Nevertheless, the fact remains that Rome owes nearly the entirety of its artistic achievements to the Greeks. The Greeks had long perfected sculpture, producing some of history's finest works.
Roman architecture. Rome was a city of achievements. Rome had skilled engineers of the ancient world. Though Rome had been in debt to the Greeks by adapting to many of their skills, Rome surpassed by building better buildings, also along with the creation of new inventions like concrete. During the Roman anarchy, Rome fell under the rule of the Etruscan king. Rome gained to the writing skills brought out by the Etruscan. Also, adding to this, Rome adapted to the building Greek-style temples through the Etruscans' reign. Roman architecture had comprised dome, arcs, barrel, vaults, and cross vaults. In Rome's existence, some of the greatest architecture were built such as the Pont du Gard, aqueducts, Pantheon, imperial cult, and to name another, the Basilica. Therefore, Rome was a rich city full of great industrial buildings and architectures. Romans also had arts that adorned the buildings. Unique pieces of arts were often mosaic, and some were frescoes. The Romans appraised their arts. In the architectural built mosaics or amphitheaters and columns were built to hold their history. Roman architecture adapted the external language of classical Greek architecture for the purposes of the ancient Romans, but was different from Greek buildings, becoming a new architectural style. The two styles are often considered one body of classical architecture. Roman architecture flourished in the Roman Republic and even more so under the Empire, when the great majority of surviving buildings were constructed. some of which the ruins remain. Roman architecture took over right where the builders from ancient Greece left off after the decline of Greek civilization, but unlike their predecessors, the Romans placed far more emphasis on the practicality of their architectural designs. This was a major departure from contemporary practices, which had always placed the focus on a structure's exterior design and aesthetic appeal. The Greeks, Persians, and Egyptians before them created many monumental pieces of architecture, but their magnificence was limited to the exterior only. Here is a list of the most magnificent ancient Roman pieces of architecture that reflect the engineering ingenuity of the Romans. When thinking of Roman architecture, there is usually one building that stands out, one we are all familiar with, and one that is truly eternalized in epic films and literature: the Colosseum. The Colosseum was Rome's most famous engineering marvel and architecture. Unlike earlier Greek theaters that were built into hillsides, the Colosseum is an entirely freestanding structure. It derives its basic exterior and interior architecture from that of two Roman theaters back to back. The construction of Colosseum began in 72 AD under Vespasian and constructed ended in 80 AD, but Vespasian died the year before because of natural causes. The Colosseum was mostly made of limestones, concrete, and marble. The Colosseum was built by 1,200 slaves who were captured by Vespasian. The Colosseum had a retractable roof that could be angled to where the sun was. The Roman Colosseum did not have just one prominent architect. Earlier, it was believed that Virgil, an ancient Roman poet, designed the Colosseum, but now people know that there was not just one prominent architect or designer behind this monument. The purpose of the Colosseum was to be a place when all of the chaos consumed in the city to be channeled. Throughout the day, different events happened at the Colosseum. In the morning, the gladiators fought animals. In the afternoon, slaves were being sacrificed. And finally, in the afternoon, gladiators fought against the gladiators. The Colosseum was a place that was able to be used for entertainment by everyone. The Colosseum was one of the greatest pieces of architecture in history and contributed to Rome being the most successful civilization. Right here we have Pantheon. Regarding Roman architectures and engineers, Roman Pantheon brought interior designs such as the oculus that allowed light to shine into the Pantheon. Pantheon is the most well-preserved architectural marvel from the ancient Roman era. Unlike many other contemporary Roman temples that were almost always dedicated to a particular Roman deities, their pantheon was a temple for all the Roman gods. The construction of this temple was completed in 125 AD during the rule of Hadrian. We also have the amphitheater in the city of Nimes. The amphitheater of Nimes is a perfect illustration of the degree of perfection attained by Roman engineers in designing and constructing this type of extremely complex building. Lastly, we have the Diocletian's Palace. This marvelous building was built by the famous Roman Emperor Diocletian in preparation for his retirement. At present, Diocletian's Palace is one of the most popular archaeological attractions in Croatia, and also a World Heritage Site as declared by UNESCO. In fact, Roman architecture introduced new and innovative designs and building materials that would shape the future of architecture for centuries to come. The Romans constructed various types of buildings ranging from temples to buildings suited for entertainment purposes like the famous Colosseum in the shape of an amphitheater. Houses ranged from farmhouses or villas to apartment blocks or insulae in more populated urban areas, much like in our 21st century urban living style. The Romans also innovated the building of baths and aqueducts, which allowed clean water into the city. Now we will jump into the Roman architects. The Romans were obsessed with building, so the architects played a major role in the Roman society. The ancient Romans were pretty skilled at a few things. They figured out how to make a successful republic and were prolific builders who filled their world with roads, aqueducts, temples, and public buildings on a size and scale never been before seen. So engineers, land surveyors, and architects, which were essentially one in the same, were pretty important people. So let's get to know a few of the people who literally built ancient Rome. First to introduce is Vitruvius. Any list of Roman architects has to begin with a single name, Marcus Vitruvius Pollio. Vitruvius was not just a Roman architect, he was the Roman architect. So what made Vitruvius so great? Well, Vitruvius was the architect of Julius Caesar from 58 to 51 BCE. Not only did he build several structures, but he also traveled extensively around the Mediterranean and studied architecture from a theoretical perspective. The result was a major text entitled De Architectura, written between 30 and 20 BCE. Most famously, perhaps, Vitruvius outlined the elements of architectural theory, starting with the three elements of a good building: stability, usefulness, and beauty. We call this the Vitruvian triad. Vitruvius' works are the best source we have on ancient architecture. He essentially founded the theoretical approach to architecture, solidified it as an academic and artistic career in Rome, and helped define the foundations for Western architecture still embraced by architects today. After Vitruvius, there were many architects who helped Rome grow. Only one, however, can really be said to rival Vitruvius' fame. Apollodorus of Damascus was a 2nd century CE architect from Damascus, then part of the Rome Empire, today part of Syria. Apollodorus was the favored architect of the Emperor Trajan, who ruled from 98 to 117 CE. Trajan celebrated the success and wealth of Rome by commissioning a large number of building projects, most of them executed by Apollodorus. While Apollodorus of Damascus built structures and monuments across the Roman Empire, there are two in Rome that really defined his career. First is Trajan's Column, a 98-foot tall monument celebrating Trajan's victory over the Dacians. And his other major project in Rome was Trajan's Forum, a major public square that surrounded Trajan's Column. The fora were important symbols in Rome, built by the emperors to demonstrate the respect for the rights and traditions of the Roman people. It contained public markets and meeting places, temples to the Roman gods, statues of Trajan, and of course Trajan's Column. It was the last of the great fora to be built in ancient Rome, representing a system of urban renovation that demonstrated the emperor's continued commitment to his people. And that ends my topic for Roman architecture.
Good day, everyone. My name is Megan J.B. Ag, and today I am going to talk about the Roman art sculptures. So, Roman sculpture may be divided into four main categories, which are historical reliefs, portrait busts and statues, including equestrian statues, funerary reliefs, or sarcophagi or tomb sculpture, and lastly, the copies of ancient Greek works. Like architecture, a good deal of Roman sculpture was created to serve a purpose, namely to impress the public, be they Roman citizens or barbarians, and communicate the power of majesty of Rome. In its important works, at least, there was a constant expression of seriousness, with none of the Greek conceptualism or introspection. The mood, pose, and facial features of the Roman statue of an emperor, for instance, was typically solemn and unsmiling. As Rome grew more confident from the reign of Augustus, from 31 BCE to 14 CE, its leaders might appear in more magnanimous poses. But gravitas, an underlying sense of Roman greatness, was never far from the surface. Another important characteristic of Rome's plastic art was its realism. The highly detailed reliefs on Trajan's Column and the Column of Marcus Aurelius, for instance, are perfect illustrations of this focus on accurate representation, and have been important sources of information for scholars on many aspects of the Roman legion, its equipment and battle tactics. Nonetheless, as we have seen, Roman sculptures borrowed heavily from the sculpture of ancient Greece, aside from the sheer numbers of portrait busts and the quality of its historical beliefs. Roman sculpture was dominated by high classical Greek sculpture as well as by Hellenistic Greek sculpture. What's more, with the expansion of Rome's empire and the huge rise in demand for statuary, sculptors churned out endless copies of Greek statues. So the first type of Roman art sculpture is historical relief. So Rome didn't invent relief sculpture, Stone Age man did. Nor was there any particular genius in the skill of its carvers and stonemasons. Both the reliefs of the Parthenon from 447 to 422 BCE and the frieze of the Pergamon altar of Zeus 166 to 154 BCE outshone anything created in Italy. What Rome did was to inject the genre with a new set of aesthetics, a new purpose, namely to make history. After all, if an event or campaign is carved in stone, it must be true, right? So the Greeks adopted the more cultured approach of recording their history more obliquely, using scenes from mythology. The Romans were far more down to earth. They sculpted their history as it happened, warts and all. So the first example of historical relief sculpture was Trajan's Column. So the greatest relief sculpture of ancient Rome, Trajan's Column, is a 125-foot Doric-style monument designed by the architect Apollodorus of Damascus. It has a spiral frieze that winds 23 times around its shaft, commemorating the Dacian triumphs of Emperor Trajan from 98 to 117 CE. Sculpted in the cool, balanced style of 2nd century, its composition and extraordinarily meticulous detail makes it one of the finest reliefs in history of sculpture. A full-size cast of Trajan's Column is on show at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the National History Museum of Romania, Bucharest. So, next is the Marcus Aurelius Column. Second only to Trajan's monument, this 100-foot Doric column in the Piazza Colonna also features a winding ribbon of marble sculpture carved in low relief, which illustrates the story of the emperor's Danubian or Marcomannic Wars, waged by him during the period 166 to 180 CE. It includes the controversial rain miracle, in which a colossal thunderstorm saves the Roman army from death at the hands of the barbarian Quadi tribes. The sculptural style of the column differs significantly from that of Trajan's Column, as it introduces the more expressive style of the 3rd century, seen also in the triumphal arch of Septimius Severus from 199 to 203 CE by the foot of the Capitoline Hill. The heads of the Marcus Aurelius figures are larger than normal to show off their facial expressions. A higher relief is used, permitting greater contrast between light and shadow. Overall, much more dramatic, a style which clearly reflected the uncertain state of the Roman Empire. So the next type of Roman art sculpture is the portrait busts and statues and equestrian statues. These works of marble and occasionally bronze sculptures were another important Roman contribution to the art of antiquity. Effigies of Roman leaders had been displayed in public places for centuries, but with the onset of empire in the late 1st century BCE, marble portrait busts and statues of the emperor, which were copied en masse and sent to all parts of the Roman world, served an important function in reminding people of Rome's reach. They also served an important unifying force. Roman administrators had them placed or erected in squares or public buildings throughout the empire, and affluent citizens bought them for their reception rooms and gardens to demonstrate loyalty. The traditional head and shoulders bust was probably borrowed from the Etruscan art, since Greek busts were usually made without shoulders. Roman statues and portrait busts are in many of the best art museums around the world, notably the Louvre from Paris, the Vatican Museums in Rome, the British Museum in London, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. So the first example of portrait busts is Colossus of Constantine. So the Colossus of Constantine was a huge acrolytic statue of the late Roman Emperor Constantine the Great that once occupied the west apse of the Basilica of Maxentius on the Via Sacra near the Forum Romanum in Rome. Constantine the Great was the first Christian emperor of Rome, and his reign had a profound effect on the subsequent development of the Roman, later Byzantine world. By 325, he had succeeded in reunifying the empire, having defeated the last of his former tetrarchic colleagues, the Eastern Emperor Licinius. He thereafter aimed to establish a new dynasty and to found a new capital named Constantinople after himself. Christianity played an important role not only in Constantine's personal life and success, but also in the program of reform and renewal that he had planned for the Roman Empire. Although the court and administration no longer resided at Rome, Constantine was careful not to neglect the old imperial city and adorned it with many new secular and Christian buildings. So the next one is the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. The equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius is an ancient Roman equestrian statue on the Capitoline Hill in Rome, Italy. It is made of bronze and stands 4.24 meters or 13.9 feet tall. Although the emperor is mounted, it exhibits many similarities to standing statues of Augustus. The original is on display in the Capitoline Museums, with the one now standing in the open air of the Piazza del Campidoglio being a replica made in 1981, when the original was taken down for restoration. The emperor's horse is a magnificent example of dynamism captured in the sculptural medium. The horse, caught in motion, raises its right foreleg at the knee while planting its left foreleg on the ground. Its motion checked by the application of reins, which the emperor originally held in his left hand. The horse's body, in particular its musculature, has been modeled very carefully by the artist, resulting in a powerful rendering. In keeping with the motion of the horse's body, its head turns to its right with its mouth opened slightly. The horse wears a harness, some elements of which have not survived. The horse is saddled with a Persian-style saddlecloth of several layers, as opposed to a rigid saddle. It should be noted that the horse is an important and expensive element of the overall composition. So the third type of Roman art sculpture is the funerary relief or the sarcophagi. As Rome turned from cremation to burial at the end of the 1st century CE, stone coffins known as sarcophagi were much in demand. The three most common types being Metropolitan Roman made in Rome, Attic style made in Athens, and Asiatic made in Dokimeon, Phrygia. All were carved and usually decorated with sculpture, in this case reliefs. The most expensive sarcophagi were carved from marble, though other stone was also used, as was wood and even lead. In addition to a range of different depictions of the deceased, such as Etruscan-style full-length sculptural portraits of the person reclining on a sofa. Popular motifs used by sculptors included episodes from Roman or Greek mythology, as well as genre and hunting scenes and garlands of fruit and leaves. Towards the end of the Roman Empire, sarcophagi became an important medium for Christian Roman art from 313 onwards. So the first example is the sarcophagus of Helena. The sarcophagus of Helena is the red porphyry coffin in which Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine the Great, was buried, and she died in 329. The coffin, deprived of its contents for centuries, was removed from the mausoleum of Helena at Tor Pignatara, just outside the walled city of Rome, and ultimately moved to the Vatican Museums in the 18th century, and now is in the Sala Croce Greca of the Pio Clementine Vatican Museum. The sarcophagus is carved in the Egyptian porphyry, used only in the finest Byzantine imperial monuments. It is noted that the carved imagery depicts victorious Roman cavalry riding above captured barbarians. It isn't clear if such imagery was intended for the sarcophagus of a highly religious Christian woman or whether the coffin was repurposed for her burial. Though the latter is considered unlikely, as Helena, as the emperor's mother, would likely have held enough esteem as to have had a custom-made coffin. So on to the last type of Roman art sculpture, which is the copies of ancient Greek works. Although the wholesale replication of Greek statues indicated a hesitancy and lack of creativity on the part of Roman artists, the history of art could not be more grateful to them for their efforts. Indeed, it is fair to say that one of the greatest contributions of Rome to the history of art lies in its replication of original Greek statues, 99% of which have disappeared. Without Roman copies of the originals, Greek art would never have received the appreciation it deserves. And Renaissance art, and thus Western art in general, might have taken a very different course. The main difference between Greek and Roman sculpture was the latter was more personalized. Greek statues were of idealized human forms of athletes and gods, while Roman statues depicted real people, primarily people important enough to have an image of them commissioned or wealthy enough to afford their own. There are few examples of Marcus Aurelius, Caesar, and Vespasian all exist today. These statues obviously were intended to portray the leaders in the best light and ended up looking like the equivalent of modern-day blown dry images of politicians. The most revealing and skilled works are busts done of ordinary Romans and Arabs, but even their facial features and wrinkles were often used to convey the intent of the sculptor, not necessarily depict a real-life person. So the first example is the marble head of Athena, or the so-called Athena Medici, copy of a Greek statue of 430 BC attributed to Phidias. This head is from a fine Roman copy of an over life-size statue of the goddess Athena, which has long been attributed to Phidias, the most famous artist of that period. The eyes were once inset with colored stones. The head retains part of the frontlet and neck guard of an Attic helmet that was originally completed in wood and gilded. This combination of marble and wood, whereby the drapery and attributes such as the helmet were worked in wood and gilded while the flesh parts were carved in marble, is known as the acrolytic technique. It imitated the appearance of immensely valuable gold and ivory statues, such as the great Athena Parthenos that stood inside the Parthenon in Athens and the colossal seated statue of Zeus at Olympia. And now on to the next example, which is the marble statue group of the Three Graces. Roman copy of a Greek work of the 2nd century BC, these young girls linked in a dance-like pose represent the Three Graces, Aglaia or beauty, Euphrosyne or mirth, and Thalia abundance. They bestow what is most pleasurable and beneficent in nature and society, fertility and growth, beauty in the arts, and harmonious reciprocity between men. They enjoyed venerable cults in Greece and Asia Minor. In mythology, they play an attendant role, raising festivals and organizing dances. Their closest connection is with Aphrodite, whom they serve as handmaidens. This carefully calculated frieze-like composition is typical of classicizing art of the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, instantly recognizable. It soon became the canonic formula for representing the Graces, who appeared in every medium and on every kind of object, from mirrors to sarcophagi. So that is for my report. Thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. I am Kaina Ortiz and I'm here to report about Roman painting. Roman painting survives mainly in the form of murals and panel portraits, executed in a realistic style. This style descends from classical or Hellenistic Greek painting, which was absorbed by the Roman state as it expanded across the Mediterranean basin. Building on Greek techniques, the Romans brought realistic painting to its highest development in the pre-modern world. While there is not a large collection of ancient Roman paintings, the best collection of ancient Roman art came from the remains of Pompeii and Herculaneum. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it buried and preserved all sorts of Roman artwork, including magnificent murals or wall paintings painted to decorate the interiors. The murals were largely done as frescoes, and most of them are decorative murals, featuring seascapes and landscapes, and were painted by skilled interior decorators rather than virtuoso artists, a clue to the function of art in Roman society. In their effort to satisfy the huge demand for painting throughout the empire from officials or senior army officers, householders, and the general public, Roman artists produced panel paintings in encaustic and tempera, large and small-scale murals in fresco, and mastered all the painting genres, including their own brand of triumphal history painting, also illumination, which is a painted decoration of manuscripts. Panel painting. In Rome, as in Greece, the highest form of painting was panel painting, executed on a rigid support, ordinarily wood or metal. Panel painting can be executed using two methods, encaustic or tempera. Encaustic describes both the paint and painting technique, which uses hot beeswax to bind color pigments and to facilitate their application to a surface, while tempera is a permanent fast-drying painting medium consisting of color pigments mixed with a water-soluble binder medium, usually glutinous material such as egg yolk. Panel painting were mass-produced in their thousands for display in offices and public buildings throughout the empire. Unfortunately, almost all painted panels have been lost, but we have here panel paintings that survived. We have here the best surviving example from the art of classical antiquity is probably the Severentondo, which is a portrait of Roman Emperor Septimus Severus with his family, painted in tempera on a circular wood panel. Also, the best example from the Roman Empire is the astonishing series of Fayum mummy portraits painted in Egypt during the period of 50 BCE to 250 CE. Triumphal painting. Roman artists were also frequently commissioned to produce pictures highlighting military successes, which is a form known as triumphal painting. This type of history painting is usually executed as a mural painting in fresco. It would depict the battle or campaign in meticulous detail and might incorporate mixed media adornments and map designs to inform and impress the public. This painting would be surrounded in gold and ivory frames. Triumphal scenes can also be seen elsewhere, most evidently on Trajan's column, where there are images of Roman battles during the Dacian Wars. Illumination. Roman painting, along with murals and panels, was illumination, which is a painted decoration of manuscripts. The Romans absorbed this art form from the Greeks, who practiced it in Egypt during the Hellenistic period upon papyrus scrolls. While no Greek illumination survives, a modest amount of Roman work does, due largely to the Roman use of parchment, or adult animal skin, and vellum, which is a young animal skin, rather than papyrus, which is much less durable. The style of Roman illumination reflects that of Roman mural painting. Murals. Knowledge of pagan Roman murals springs mainly from the city of Pompeii and other nearby settlements buried under many feet of ash and pumice by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79. This deadly ash blanket converted Pompeii into a vast time capsule, providing modern archaeologists with a rare glimpse into many aspects of Roman life. One of these aspects was wall painting. By studying works at Pompeii and other surrounding region, art historians have identified four consecutive styles dubbed the Pompeian styles. Roman murals executed either al fresco, with paint being applied to wet plaster, or al secco, using paint on dry walls, are usually classified into four periods as set out by the German archaeologist August Mau following his excavations at Pompeii. First style, circa 200 to 80 BCE, also known as incrustation or masonry style. It derived from Hellenistic palaces in the Middle East using vivid colors. It stimulates the appearance of marble. The first style, also referred to as structural incrustation or masonry style, was most popular from 200 to 60 BC. It is characterized by the stimulation of marble or marble veneering with other simulated elements such as suspended alabaster disc and vertical lines, wooden beams in yellow and pillars, and cornices in white, and the use of vivid colors, both being a sign of wealth. This style was a replica of that found in Ptolemaic palaces of the Near East, where the walls were inset with real stones and marbles, and also reflects the spread of Hellenistic culture as Rome interacted and conquered other Greek and Hellenistic states in this period. Mural reproductions of Greek paintings are also found. These styles divided the walls into various multicolored patterns that took the place of extremely expensive cut stones. The first style was also used with other styles for decorating the lower sections of walls that were not seen as much as the higher levels. The Roman painting at the Stabias Stanza Villa di Ariana is a good example of this style. The second style. The architectural style occurred around 80 BCE to 100 CE. This style still utilized the imitation of marble blocks. However, there was an increase of illusionistic detail using architectural elements. This aimed to create the illusion of extra space by painting pictures with significant depth, such as views overlooking a garden or other landscape. In time, the style developed to cover the entire wall, creating the impression that one was looking out of a room into a real scene. Paintings would appear three-dimensional with some areas appearing real but not. Some walls also had life-sized figures depicted on them, which enhanced the sense of realism and three-dimensionality. Examples of these styles are seen in the fresco in the bedroom of Villa Epiphanius Sinistars and the Dionystic frieze dated prior to 79 CE from the Villa of Mysteries. The third style. The ornate style occurred around 10 BCE to 50 CE. This style also depicted similar architectural elements from the second style, but paintings depicted more decorative motifs, often with monochromatic colors such as red or blacks, which made it appear flatter rather than three-dimensional. This was more ornamental with less illusion of depth. The wall was divided into precise zones using pictures of columns or foliage. Scenes painted in the zones were typically either exotic representations of real or imaginary animals or merely monochromatic linear drawings. The different motifs utilized took inspiration from florals and natural environment. They also depicted images and scenes from Egypt. Examples of these styles are seen in the Villa Agrippa Postumus. The fourth style. The intricate style occurred from 60 to 79 CE. This style is often described as being a combination of the other three styles. It depicted the imitation of marble, the architectural details of painting, as well as the ornamentation of the more decorative third style. The subject matter also became more diverse, depicting not only natural scenes of the landscapes, but also mythological themes and figures, as well as the inclusion of still lifes. This was a mixture of the previous two styles. Depth returned to the mural, but it was executed more decoratively, with greater use of ornamentation. For example, the artist might paint several windows which, instead of looking out onto a landscape or cityscape, showed scenes from Greek myths or other fantasy scenes, including still life. An example of this style is seen in the House of the Vetti, which was a large townhouse with numerous detailed ancient Roman paintings decorating the walls in each room. A famous example is in the Ixion room, featuring multiple panels of various figures and architectural details that make each panel appear as if it is part of the real environment.